This is ANN News Brief.
Good morning, I'm Lucy Adeyemi. The situation in Sudan has degenerated after the military shot live ammunition at sitting protesters near the military headquarters in Khartoum this morning. At least 8 protesters have been killed and several injured. Many Sudanese citizens have been pouring into the capital to join the long-running sitting protest. When the crackdown began and shots rang out, protesters started moving to another part of the city to continue their demonstrations. Sudan has been governed by a transitional military council since President Omar al-Bashir was overthrown. In a coup in April, protesters have been demanding that a civilian government should take over the running of the country. The Sudanese Professionals Association, organizers of the nationwide protest, said in a short statement that the military was attempting to disperse the sitting protesters. Fire was seen blazing around the military headquarters, where the military began burning protesters' tents. Eyewitnesses say protesters burnt tires and set up barricades to try fending off the security forces. The military authorities have denied they were trying to disperse the demonstrators outside the military headquarters. Meanwhile, more than 70 persons have been arrested in demonstrations in Cameroon. Thousands of supporters of Maurice Kamto have defied a heavy police presence and are staging protests in several towns of the Central African state. Kamto is the man who says he won the October presidential election. One of the protesters' demand is the immediate release of their party leader. Scores of his supporters have been jailed since January. Protesters in Yaoundé said on Saturday they will continue protesting until they find justice, which he said is being denied to them by Cameroon President Paul Biya. They vowed not to bow to pressure as they keep pressing for freedom for Kamto and those supporters arrested at the beginning of the year. At least a dozen people, including Kamto's first Vice President Mamadou Mota of the MRC party, have been arrested and detained in Yaoundé and Douala. Cameroon's Minister of External Relations, Lajan Mbela, had warned last week during a meeting with diplomats, United Nations staff, and international NGOs that the planned protests will not be tolerated. Stay with us, we'll be back after this message. The United Nations says international donors have pledged to contribute more than $1 billion to help rebuild areas and infrastructure destroyed by cyclones Kenneth and Idai in Mozambique. That amount is less than half what the government says is needed. The announcement was made by the country's president, Filipe Nyusi, at the end of a 2-day international conference of donors that drew to the city of Beira around 700 participants from international organizations, donors, the private sector, and civil society. Beira is one of the areas worst hit by the cyclones. Cyclone Kenneth crashed into the province of Cabo Delgado and flattened entire villages with winds of almost 300 kilometers per hour, killing around 45 persons. Mozambique was still struggling to deal with the impact of Cyclone Idai, which hampered the country's central region just 6 weeks before it died. That's CNN News Brief. For details on these and other stories, visit our social media platforms and join the conversation on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I'm Lucy Adeyemi.